The emergency beacon pierced through the void of space like a dying scream. Ambassador Zelith's 4 arms trembled as she activated the long-range transmitter aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge. Behind her, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, their crystalline bodies reflecting the red emergency lights that bathed everything in an ominous glow. "Madam Ambassador," called Navigator Vorth from his station, his voice crackling with static through his translator implant. "The Krextar fleet has breached our outer defensive line. They'll be within striking distance in 47 standard minutes." Zelith's compound eyes focused on the tactical display, showing the approaching armada. Thousands of Krextar warships moved like a plague of metallic locusts across the star map, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with predatory hunger. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, crewed by warriors bred for nothing but conquest and consumption. "How many worlds have they taken now?" she whispered, though she already knew the answer. 17 systems in the past rotation, madam. The hegemony's fleets cannot match their speed or ferocity. They consume entire populations and convert the biomass into more ships, more warriors. Communications Officer Thane paused, his hands shaking over his console. "We've lost contact with the Meridian colonies. All of them." Zelith closed her primary eyes and accessed her neural implant, connecting to the Galactic Council's emergency database. The reports flooded her consciousness like ice water. The peaceful Andromedans had been harvested in their crystal cities. The wise Centauri had made their last stand on their library worlds, choosing to burn their knowledge rather than let it fall to the swarm. The proud Volcrani had fought until their very last breath, but even their warrior culture couldn't stand against the endless tide. "What are the Terrans?" asked Vorth suddenly. "Have they been contacted?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the bridge. Zelith felt her secondary hearts skip a beat at the mention of Earth's inhabitants. The humans were known throughout the galaxy, but not for reasons that inspired confidence. They were classified as a class, 7 Deathworld species, beings that had evolved on a planet so hostile that it had forged them into something the rest of the galaxy viewed with equal parts fascination and terror. The Terrans. Thane began hesitantly. The Council voted to exclude them from the defensive pacts. Their homeworld is considered too dangerous, their military too unpredictable. Zelith remembered the debates in the council chambers. Earth's representatives had sat quietly while species after species voiced their concerns. Humans were too violent, too adaptable, too willing to sacrifice everything for victory. They came from a world where the very atmosphere was toxic to most galactic species, where the weather could kill, where predators hunted in packs, and the dominant species had clawed its way to the top through millions of years of warfare. But now, as the Krextar closed in like a cosmic hurricane, those same traits that had made the galaxy nervous seemed suddenly valuable. "Madam," Vorth said carefully, "our defensive fleets are scattered or destroyed. The member worlds are falling one by one. If we're going to ask for help from the Deathworlders, shouldn't we do it before there's nothing left to save?" Zelith stared at the tactical display. The Krextar were unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. They didn't seek territory or resources in the traditional sense. They sought biological matter to fuel their ever-growing swarm. They had appeared from the galactic rim without warning, moving faster than any known technology should allow, consuming everything in their path. The peaceful species of the inner galaxy had spent millennia developing art, philosophy, and technology. They had created a golden age of cooperation and mutual understanding. But none of them had ever faced an enemy that wanted nothing more than to strip the flesh from their bones and use it to build more monsters. "Open a channel to Earth," Zelith commanded, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her mind. "Madam, the Council protocols specifically forbid. The Council is dead or dying," she snapped. "Open the channel." Thane's fingers danced over his controls with practiced precision. The massive communication array on the ship's hull turned toward the small blue-green world that hung like a jewel in the darkness. Earth, the planet that had given birth to beings so fierce that they hunted their own apex predators for sport, so resilient that they thrived in environments that would kill most galactic citizens within minutes. "Channel open, madam. We're transmitting on all human frequencies." Zelith took a deep breath, tasting the recycled air of the ship and knowing it might be among her last. When she spoke, her words would either bring salvation or seal their doom. This is Ambassador Zealith of the Galactic Council, aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge. We are broadcasting this message to Earth and all human colonies on all available frequencies. Our worlds are dying. Our fleets are broken. An enemy unlike any we have ever faced is consuming our civilization system by system. And She paused, the words catching in her throat like bitter medicine. We are asking for help. The transmission beam lanced out across the void, carrying their desperate plea toward the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. Behind them, the Krextar swarm grew larger on the sensors, their biomechanical ships pulsing with alien hunger. Communications Officer Thane monitored the response channels, his crystalline features reflecting the soft glow of his instruments. Madam, we're receiving multiple acknowledgments from human colonies. They're forwarding our message to Earth's military command. Zealith felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The humans had listened. Whether they would act was another question entirely. She thought of the reports she'd read about human warfare, the tactical doctrines that emphasized overwhelming force and total commitment. The galaxy had always assumed such methods were the products of a savage, undeveloped culture. Now she wondered if they might be exactly what was needed. How long until the Krextar reach us? She asked. 31 minutes, madam. Zealith nodded and settled into her command chair, her forearms folded in the traditional posture of dignified waiting. Around her, the crew continued their preparations, checking weapons that had never been fired in anger, running diagnostics on shields designed for debris, not warships. They had done all they could. The message was sent, their position was transmitted, their need was clear. Whether the humans would risk their own lives for a galaxy that had treated them as dangerous outcasts remained to be seen. But as Zealith watched the approaching Krextar swarm on the tactical display, she found herself thinking about the humans' homeworld. A planet where tsunamis could wipe out entire continents, where volcanic eruptions could change the climate for years, where massive predators lurked in every environment from frozen tundra to burning desert. A world so hostile that it had forged its children into beings that the rest of the galaxy feared to face. Perhaps, she thought as the minutes ticked away, it was time for the galaxy to learn what Earth's children were truly capable of when someone they protected was threatened. The stars wheeled slowly outside the viewport, beautiful and indifferent to the drama playing out in their light. Somewhere among them, the most peaceful civilizations in galactic history waited to learn if the most violent would answer their call. The response came faster than anyone had expected. Communications Officer Thane straightened in his chair as his console erupted with incoming signals. Madam Ambassador, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Multiple transmissions, actually. The signal strength is... He paused, checking his instruments twice. This can't be right. What is it? Zealith demanded, moving to stand behind his station. The transmission power is off the charts. They're broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously, with enough wattage to reach half the galaxy. It's like they want everyone to hear this. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a star chamber lined with metal walls. A single human sat behind a simple desk, wearing what appeared to be a dark uniform with minimal decoration. Ambassador Zealith had seen humans before during council sessions, but this one seemed different. Where the diplomatic representatives had been carefully groomed and polite, this human radiated something that made her primary survival instincts scream warnings. The human was relatively young by their species standards, perhaps 40 standard years, with graying hair and eyes the color of winter storms. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. This is Admiral Marcus Chun, Supreme Commander of the Terran Defense Force. We have received your distress call, Ambassador Zealith. The human's eyes seemed to look directly through the screen at her. We are mobilizing immediately. Navigator Vorth leaned forward, his crystalline features reflecting disbelief. Mobilizing? But they can't possibly have enough ships to... Our response fleet will reach your position in approximately 18 minutes, the Admiral continued. I need your tactical data on the Krextar immediately. Ship configurations, movement patterns, biological weaknesses, anything you have. Zealith felt her secondary heart skip. 18 minutes? The nearest human colony was 3 days away at maximum hyperspace velocity. Admiral, I think there may be some confusion about distances. No confusion, Ambassador. We've been tracking the Krextar incursion since it began. Our deep space monitoring stations have been watching them consume your outer worlds for the past month. The implications hit Zealith like a physical blow. You've been watching? Why didn't you offer assistance before now? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Because the Galactic Council made it very clear that human military assistance was neither wanted nor welcome. You classified us as a threat to galactic peace. You excluded us from your defense pacts. You voted to limit our military expansion and demanded we keep our fleets confined to human space. The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of electronics. Zealith felt shame burn through her like acid. Everything the Admiral said was true. The Council had feared human military might more than they had trusted it. But now you're here, she said quietly. Now we're here, Chen confirmed. Because despite what your Council thinks of us, we don't abandon people to monsters. Transmit your tactical data. My fleet will handle the rest. Thane's fingers flew over his controls, uploading everything they knew about the Krextar to the human ships. As the data streamed across space, more signals began appearing on their sensors. Madam, Vorth whispered, staring at his tactical display. I'm reading massive hyperspace distortions approaching our position. The readings they're enormous. The space around Harmony's edge began to shimmer and twist as reality bent under the strain of multiple hyperspace exits. Ambassador Zealith watched in stunned silence as ship after ship materialized from the cosmic void. But these weren't the elegant, peaceful vessels of the Galactic Council. These were warships, pure and simple, their hulls dark and angular, bristling with weapon emplacements that looked like they had been designed by someone who understood that space combat was about applying overwhelming force to critical points. The first ship to fully materialize was massive beyond anything Zealith had seen. It was easily 5 times larger than the largest Council dreadnought, its hull a matte black that seemed to absorb the light of nearby stars. Weapon ports lined its surface like the eyes of some primordial predator. My gods, breathed Thane. How many ships are there? More vessels continued to appear. Sleek destroyers that moved through space like hunting cats, massive carriers that disgorged clouds of smaller attack craft, and strange vessels whose purpose Zealith couldn't even guess. Each ship bore the same utilitarian design philosophy. Function over form, lethality over aesthetics. Admiral, Zealith managed, finding her voice. How many ships have you brought? Chen's image remained steady on the screen. First Fleet consists of 417 capital ships with supporting elements. We have additional fleets standing by if needed. 400 ships. Zealith, try to process the number. The entire Galactic Defense Force at its peak had numbered barely 200 vessels, and most of those had been destroyed in the first wave of Krextar attacks. Where did you get so many ships? She asked. We built them, Chen replied simply. When you have a galaxy that considers you a threat, you prepare for the day someone might decide to do something about it. We've been building ships for the past 50 years. On the tactical display, the human fleet was arranging itself in a formation unlike anything in Council military doctrine. Instead of the traditional defensive spheres or battle lines, they were forming what looked like a 3-dimensional spearhead aimed directly at the approaching Krextar swarm. Admiral, Zealith said urgently, the Krextar ships are heavily armored and armed. Their biomechanical technology is unlike anything we've encountered. They adapt to our weapons within minutes of first contact. We know, Chen said. We've been analyzing the combat data from your previous engagements. Standard Council weapons rely on energy-based systems with predictable frequencies. The Krextar bioships adapt by growing new cellular structures to absorb or deflect those energy types. Then, how do you plan to, Ambassador, may I ask what you know about human military history? Zealith blinked, confused by the apparent change of subject. Only what was in our initial contact reports. You have a history of territorial conflicts. Chen's expression shifted slightly, and for the first time, Zealith thought she detected what might have been amusement. We have a history of solving problems that others consider unsolvable. When energy weapons become ineffective, humans have a tendency to fall back on more traditional approaches. Before Zealith could ask what he meant, her attention was drawn to the tactical display. The Krextar swarm had finally come into visual range, and the sight of them made her skin crawl. The biomechanical ships pulsed with organic life, their hulls rippling like muscle tissue. Weapon appendages that looked more grown than built extended from their surfaces like the tentacles of some cosmic nightmare. "They're beautiful in their own way," Admiral Chen observed, apparently watching the same display. "Efficient, adaptive, ruthless. They've clearly evolved to be the perfect biological weapon. Admiral, you should know, they don't just destroy ships. They consume the crew, convert the biomass into more ships, more warriors. If they take your vessels, they won't," Chen interrupted with absolute certainty. The Krextar swarm began to accelerate, their bioships stretching and contracting like swimming creatures moving through liquid space. Zealith could see weapon charging sequences beginning along their hulls, bioplasma cannons that could slice through council armor like tissue paper. "Fleet Admiral," a new voice crackled through the communication system. "This is Captain Rodriguez aboard the Indomitable. All ships report ready for engagement. Shall we begin the demonstration?" "Proceed, Captain. Show them what humans do to monsters." As the words left Admiral Chen's lips, the human fleet began to move. But they didn't advance in the careful, measured way of council forces. They accelerated like bullets fired from a gun, racing toward the Krextar swarm with reckless abandon. Zealith watched in horror as the two forces closed on each other, certain she was about to witness the destruction of the only help they had received. The humans were outnumbered 3-1, and the Krextar had already proven they could adapt to any weapon the galaxy could field against them. But as the first human ships entered weapons range and opened fire, Zealith began to understand that she had fundamentally misunderstood what it meant to be from a death world. The humans hadn't come to fight a space battle. They had come to hunt. The first salvo from a human fleet defied everything Ambassador Zealith understood about modern space warfare. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, the human ships fired what appeared to be solid projectiles, massive chunks of metal that streaked across space at incredible velocity. But these weren't simple kinetic rounds. As they flew, they separated into smaller pieces, then smaller still, until each projectile had become a cloud of hypersonic metal fragments. The Krextar bioships immediately began adapting, their organic hulls rippling and changing as they attempted to grow new defensive structures. Against energy weapons, this adaptation had proven nearly instantaneous. Against the human projectiles, it was useless. The metal fragments punched through the bioships' hulls like bullets through flesh, and unlike energy weapons, there was no frequency to adapt to, no energy type to absorb. Physics was physics, and when several tons of metal moving at 10% of light speed met organic tissue, the tissue lost. "Impossible," Navigator Vorth whispered, watching as 3 Krextar vessels simply disintegrated under the human bombardment. "How are they penetrating the adaptive armor?" Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system with what Zealith was beginning to recognize as distinctly human satisfaction. "Energy weapons are elegant, but they have limitations. Mass times velocity squared is eternal." The human fleet moved through space like a pack of predators, their ships working together with a coordination that spoke of countless hours of practice. As the Krextar swarm tried to adapt to the kinetic bombardment, the humans switched tactics again. Sleek fighters launched from the human carriers, but instead of engaging in traditional dogfighting, they dove directly into the Krextar formation like suicide attackers. At the last second, they pulled away, releasing clouds of what looked like metallic spores. "What are those?" Zealith asked, tracking the strange projectiles on her sensors. "Nanomachine swarms," Chen replied casually, "programmed to consume biomechanical systems and replicate using the available materials. We call them hunters." Zealith watched in fascination and horror as the nanomachines spread across the Krextar ships like a silver plague. The biomechanical hulls began to bubble and dissolve as the microscopic machines consumed everything in their path, converting the alien technology into more of themselves. The Krextar responded with panic, firing wildly in all directions as their own ships began to turn against them. But the humans weren't finished. As the alien swarm became disorganized, massive human battleships moved into close range, and opened up with weapons that defied classification. One ship fired what appeared to be a concentrated beam of gravitational force, creating a miniature black hole that pulled several Krextar vessels into its event horizon before dissipating. Another launched missiles that phased in and out of normal space, appearing inside enemy hulls before detonating. How is this possible? Zealith demanded. These technologies are beyond anything in Council databases. Council databases catalog technologies developed by peaceful civilizations, Admiral Chen replied. Humans develop technology to solve problems. When your problem is that something wants to eat you, you develop very different solutions. Communications Officer Thane was monitoring the battle frequencies, his crystalline features reflecting the chaos of the tactical display. Madam, I'm picking up Krextar communications. They're trying to coordinate a retreat. Retreat. Zealith couldn't hide her amazement. The Krextar had never retreated from any engagement. They fought until every ship was destroyed or their enemies were consumed. On the main screen, Admiral Chen's expression had turned cold. Fleet Admiral to all ships. The enemy is attempting to withdraw. Implement Protocol 7. Zealith didn't know what Protocol 7 meant, but she was about to learn. The human ships suddenly changed formation, spreading out in all directions to surround the fleeing Krextar vessels. But instead of pursuing immediately, they launched what looked like small probes toward the edge of the system. The probes moved faster than anything Zealith had ever seen, disappearing into hyperspace almost instantly. Moments later, space began to shimmer at the system's edge as more human ships materialized, not from Zealith's location, but from every possible escape route. You had ships positioned at every hyperspace exit point, she realized. We've been tracking the Krextar for weeks, Chen confirmed. We know their movement patterns, their preferred escape routes, their tactical doctrines. This isn't our first encounter with them. The Krextar found themselves trapped in a three-dimensional cage of human warships. Some tried to fight their way out, but the humans had learned from watching the previous battles. Every time the aliens adapted to one weapon system, the humans switched to another. Kinetic rounds gave way to energy weapons, which gave way to exotic matter beams, which gave way to weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. But it was what happened next that truly showed Zealith the difference between civilized warfare and what humans considered necessary. Admiral, came a voice from one of the human ships. We're reading massive biomass signatures in the Krextar vessels. Survivors from previous battles. Zealith felt her blood freeze. The Krextar ships weren't just carrying their own crews. They were filled with the captured populations of destroyed worlds, beings kept alive to be slowly converted into more biomechanical warriors. Confirmed, Chen replied, initiating surgical strikes. All ships switched to precision mode. What followed was unlike anything in recorded military history. The human ships began performing what could only be called surgery on the alien vessels, using impossibly precise weapon strikes to cut away specific sections of the bioships while leaving others intact. They carved through hull plating and organic armor with laser-guided accuracy, opening the Krextar vessels like surgeons operating on patients. Emergency pods began ejecting from the opened ships, not human pods, but escape vessels of a dozen different alien species. The humans had somehow identified and extracted the captured populations while leaving the Krextar themselves trapped in the dying remnants of their vessels. Ow! Zealith whispered. We studied the bioship construction patterns, Admiral Chen explained. The Krextar are efficient, but they're not creative. They use the same basic design for every vessel, which means the prisoner containment areas are always in the same relative positions. We mapped their ship layouts months ago. As the last of the escape pods cleared the battle zone, the human weapons changed tone again. The precise surgical strikes gave way to something far more devastating. The remaining Krextar vessels simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not damaged. They were there one moment and gone the next, as if they had been edited out of reality. Quantum deletion charges, Chun said, noting Zealith's expression. They removed the target from the timeline for approximately 10 seconds, which is long enough for the universe to forget they ever existed. Very final. The battle was over. Where moments before there had been a massive Krextar swarm, there was now only empty space and the slowly dispersing clouds of rescued prisoners. The human fleet hung motionless among the debris, their dark ships like patient predators waiting for the next threat. Zealith slumped in her command chair, overwhelmed by what she had witnessed. The most feared enemy in galactic history had been not just defeated, but systematically dismantled by beings the Council had considered too dangerous to trust. "Admiral," she said finally, "the Krextar have consumed 17 systems. There are more swarms out there, larger than this one." "We know," Chen replied. "This was just the reconnaissance force. The main swarm is approximately 40 times larger and is currently moving toward the galactic core." Zealith felt her heart stop. 40 times larger? Then this was all meaningless. If this was just a small force. This wasn't meaningless, Ambassador. This was a field test. Chen's image leaned forward slightly. "We needed to understand exactly how the Krextar operate, how they adapt, how they think. Now we do, but 40 times larger will require 40 times the response," Chen finished. "Which is why the rest of the Terran Defense Force is currently mobilizing. This was First Fleet. We have 16 others." Zealith stared at the human admiral, trying to process the implications. 16 other fleets? Each as large and well-equipped as the one that had just annihilated a Krextar swarm? "Admiral, may I ask, exactly how large is the human military?" For the first time in their conversation, Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "Large enough, Ambassador. Large enough." 3 days later, Ambassador Zealith stood on the observation deck of the human flagship Ragnarok, watching the largest military mobilization in galactic history unfold before her eyes. The rescue operation had been swift and efficient. Human medical ships had collected the survivors from 17 destroyed worlds, providing care with technology that seemed decades ahead of anything the Council possessed. Temporary habitats had been constructed in stable systems, complete with atmosphere processors and food synthesizers calibrated to each species' biological needs. But it was the military buildup that truly staggered her. Ships continued to arrive through hyperspace portals that the humans seemed to open and close at will. Not just hundreds, but thousands of vessels, each one bristling with weapons she couldn't begin to understand. Entire fleets materialized from what the humans called dark space, hidden bases constructed in the void between systems where no one would think to look. "Your government kept this secret for 50 years?" she asked Admiral Chen, who stood beside her watching the arrivals. "Our government didn't keep it secret," Chen corrected. "The galaxy simply never asked the right questions. You wanted to know if we were a threat to galactic peace. We said no, and that was true. We had no intention of attacking anyone. But you never asked if we were prepared to defend ourselves." A massive vessel emerged from hyperspace nearby, easily twice the size of the flagship. Its hull was covered in what looked like armor plating thick enough to stop a moon. "That's the Juggernaut," Chen explained. "One of our Planet Killer class dreadnoughts, designed to crack open worlds if necessary. We have 12 of them." Zealith felt nauseous. "You built ships capable of destroying planets." "We built ships capable of destroying everything," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "Planets, stars, entire systems if the situation requires it. When you're from a death world, you learn that sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to become something worse than it is." The tactical briefing began an hour later in a chamber that seemed designed to intimidate. Holographic displays showed the current positions of Krextar forces throughout the galaxy, red markers indicating consumed systems, yellow showing systems under attack, and green marking the few remaining strongholds of galactic civilization. Representatives from the surviving Council species were present via quantum communication links, their faces displaying various degrees of hope and terror. Zealith recognized Chancellor Voss of the Andromedans, Admiral Krex of the Centauri, and High Commander Thane of the Volcrani Resistance. "The situation is simple," Admiral Chen began without preamble. "The Krextar main swarm consists of approximately 16,000 bioships arranged in 47 separate hunting groups. They're moving toward the galactic core, consuming everything in their path, and using the biomass to create more ships and warriors." The holographic display zoomed in on the largest red marker, showing a swarm of vessels so vast it looked like a crimson galaxy unto itself. "This is the primary hive," Chen continued. Our intelligence suggests it contains the original Krextar breeding population and the command organisms that direct the entire swarm. Destroy this, and the outlying groups become uncoordinated and vulnerable. Chancellor Voss's image flickered as he spoke. Admiral, with respect, every conventional strategy has failed. Our combined fleets couldn't even slow them down. How can human forces succeed where we have failed? Chen gestured to another display, showing human fleet compositions. Because conventional strategy assumes your enemy thinks like you do. The Krextar don't think like any of us. They're biological weapons that have evolved to consume and replicate. Fighting them conventionally is like trying to cure cancer with antibiotics. Then, what do you propose? Asked High Commander Thane. We do what humans do best, Chen replied. We cheat. The display changed again, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with movement vectors indicating the planned human response. Instead of meeting the Krextar head-on, the human fleets would approach from multiple vectors, using something they called dimensional shunting to appear inside the enemy formation. Phase 1 involves simultaneous strikes on all 47 hunting groups, Chen explained. We've developed weapons specifically designed to counter biomechanical adaptation. The moment they start to adapt to one threat, we hit them with something completely different. Zealith studied the battle plan, noting the complexity of the coordination required. Admiral, this would require split-second timing across hundreds of light years. How is such coordination possible? Quantum entanglement communication networks, Chen replied. Every ship in our fleet is connected through quantum-paired particles. Orders and tactical updates travel instantaneously regardless of distance. Admiral Krex of the Centauri leaned forward in his projection. In Phase 2, Chen's expression grew grimmer. Phase 2 is where things get interesting. While the main fleets are engaging the hunting groups, a specialized task force will penetrate directly to the primary hive. Their mission is to deploy what we're calling the Genesis Protocol. Which is? Chancellor Voss asked. Classified, Chen replied flatly. What I can tell you is that it will solve the Krextar problem permanently. The briefing continued for hours, covering logistics, rescue operations, and post-battle reconstruction efforts. But Zealith found herself focusing on the human officers present in the room. Unlike the diplomatic representatives she had met before, these were clearly military personnel, and they radiated a confidence that bordered on arrogance. More unsettling was their casual discussion of weapons and tactics that seemed designed to fight gods rather than mortals. They spoke of stellar compression charges and reality anchors and probability manipulation fields as if such things were normal military equipment. After the briefing, Zealith found herself alone with Admiral Chun in his private office. The room was Spartan, containing only a desk, a few chairs, and a single decoration, a photograph of a blue-green planet hanging in space. That's Earth, Chen said, noting her gaze. Taken from our first space station. Do you know what that represents to us, Ambassador? Your homeworld? Zealith replied, uncertainly. Our fortress, Chen corrected. For 50 years, the galaxy has seen Earth as a dangerous anomaly, a world that shouldn't exist. But to us it's home. Every storm that could level a city, every predator that could hunt in packs, every disease that could wipe out entire populations, they all taught us the same lesson. Which is that the universe is actively trying to kill you, and the only response is to be more dangerous than anything it can throw at you. Chen turned to face her directly. Your civilization developed in peace, Ambassador. You built art and philosophy and music because you could afford to. We built weapons because we had to. Zealith thought of her own homeworld with its gentle weather and herbivorous wildlife, its crystal cities and libraries of accumulated wisdom. Don't you ever wonder what you might have become if you hadn't needed to fight for everything? Chen was quiet for a long moment. We know exactly what we would have become, he said finally. Extinct. The universe has shown us what happens to civilizations that aren't prepared to defend themselves. The Krextar are just the latest example. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Chen activated his display, scanning the contents quickly before looking up at Zealith with an expression she couldn't read. What is it? She asked. Reconnaissance reports from the galactic rim, Chen replied. The Krextar aren't the only threat heading this way. Our deep space monitors have detected at least 3 other hostile forces moving towards civilized space. One appears to be mechanical rather than biological. Another seems to exist partially outside normal spacetime. Zealith felt her blood chill. More threats? But the galaxy can barely handle the Krextar. The galaxy can't handle any of this, Chen agreed. That's why the human fleets won't be returning to Earth after this battle. We're going to establish permanent patrol stations throughout galactic space. Someone needs to watch the dark between the stars. The Council will never approve military occupation of galactic space by human forces. Chen's smile was cold and predatory. Ambassador, with respect, the Council is dead. Most of your member worlds are gone, your fleets are scattered or destroyed, and your governments exist only as refugees aboard our ships. He gestured toward the viewport, where human warships stretched as far as the eye could see. We're not asking for permission. We're informing you of our decision. Zealith stared out at the massive fleet, beginning to understand the true scope of what was happening. The humans hadn't just come to rescue the galaxy. They had come to replace its existing power structure entirely. You planned this, she realized. You've been planning this for decades. We've been preparing for this, Chen corrected. There's a difference. We hoped it would never be necessary, but we knew someday the galaxy's peaceful approach to existence would encounter something that couldn't be reasoned with. When that day came, someone would need to step forward and do what was necessary. And you decided that someone would be humanity. The universe decided that, Chen replied. We just accepted the responsibility. Outside, the human fleet continued to grow as more ships arrived from the hidden depths of space. Zealith wondered how many more secrets humanity had kept, how many weapons and technologies and strategies they had developed in the 50 years since first contact. But as she watched the ships preparing for battle, she found herself feeling something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The galaxy's civilizations might not survive this war unchanged, but they would survive. The humans would make sure of that. Whether they would recognize the galaxy that emerged from this conflict was another question entirely. The final battle began at coordinates that had no name in any galactic database. A point in deep space where the Krextar primary hive had established itself to consume the last of the outer rim worlds before moving toward the galactic core. Ambassador Zealith watched from the command bridge of the Ragnarok as Admiral Chen's plan unfolded across space and time. The scale of the engagement defied comprehension. 17 human fleets, each larger than the entire pre-war galactic defense force, moved through hyperspace with clockwork precision. Phase 1 initiating, reported the tactical officer. All hunting groups have been engaged simultaneously. The main display showed 47 separate battle zones scattered across 1,000 light-years, each one a swirling maelstrom of weapons fire and dying ships. The humans had kept their promise. The moment the Krextar began adapting to kinetic weapons, energy beams appeared. When they adjusted to energy weapons, exotic matter disruptors emerged. When they tried to counter those, the humans deployed weapons that seemed to attack the very concept of existence. Hunting Group 17 is attempting to retreat toward the hive, came another report. Redirect 6th Fleet to intercept, Chun ordered calmly. Deploy probability mines along their escape vector. Zealith watched as space itself seemed to fracture along the Krextar retreat path. The bioships that entered the affected area simply ceased to be, not destroyed but statistically reduced to a 0% chance of existing. Admiral, she said quietly, what exactly are probability mines? Weapons that convince the universe that certain objects were never there in the first place, Chen replied without taking his eyes off the tactical display. Very effective, but they have a tendency to create temporal paradoxes if overused. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. The human fleets moved through space like the wrath of an angry god, systematically dismantling every Krextar hunting group with weapons that seemed to come from the nightmares of mad scientists. By the time the last outlying swarm was eliminated, the path to the primary hive lay open. Phase 2 commencing, the tactical officer announced. Through the viewports of the flagship, Zealith could see the primary hive in the distance, a writhing mass of biomechanical ships clustered around what looked like a living planet. The structure pulsed with organic rhythms, spawning new vessels even as they watched. Readings indicate approximately 4 million individual ships, the sensor operator reported. The central organism appears to be roughly the size of Earth's moon. Admiral Chen nodded, as if this was exactly what he had expected. Task Force Alpha, begin Genesis protocol deployment. All other units, establish perimeter and prepare for containment operations. A small group of human ships broke away from the main fleet and began accelerating toward the hive. They were unlike any vessel Zealith had seen before, sleek and angular, with hulls that seemed to bend light around them. "What is the Genesis protocol?" she asked again. This time, Chen turned to look at her directly. "Ambassador, what do you know about human religious mythology?" The question seemed to come from nowhere. Very little. Some references to creator deities and apocalyptic scenarios. In one of our oldest stories, a creator deity destroys a corrupted world with a great flood, then creates a new world from the ashes. The Genesis Protocol is our version of that story. Shun gestured toward the approaching task force. Those ships are carrying enough compressed matter to collapse the local space-time structure. When they reach the hive center, they'll detonate simultaneously. Zealith felt her blood freeze. "You're going to create a black hole?" "Several black holes. Actually, the resulting gravitational cascade will consume the entire hive and everything in it. Then, we'll use stellar engineering to create a new star in this location, a monument to everyone the Krextar consumed." The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just planning to destroy their enemies. They were planning to fundamentally alter the structure of local space, turning a region of death into a beacon of life. "The ships carrying the protocol," Zealith said. "The crews are volunteers," Chun finished. "Every one of them. They know they won't be coming back." On the tactical display, the task force ships were now deep within the hive formation. The Krextar had finally realized the danger and were converging on them like antibodies attacking an infection. But the human ships continued their approach, shrugging off bioplasma beams that could have destroyed capital ships. "How are they surviving that firepower?" Zealith demanded. "Localized reality anchors," Chen explained. "They're technically existing in a slightly different dimension from the rest of us. The Krextar weapons are hitting the space where they should be, not where they actually are." The lead ship of the task force, a vessel called Prometheus, was now close enough to the central organism that its hull was beginning to glow from the proximity to so much concentrated biological mass. Through the communication system, they could hear the ship's captain giving final reports. "This is Captain Martinez aboard Prometheus. We're in position at the hive core, beginning final protocol sequence." Admiral Chun picked up his communication unit. "Captain Martinez, this is Admiral Chun. The galaxy will remember your sacrifice. Sir, it's been an honor serving with the human fleet. Tell the survivors we made sure the monsters won't be coming back." The task force ships had formed a perfect sphere around the central organism, each vessel positioned with mathematical precision. As Zealith watched, they began to glow with an inner light that hurt to look at directly. "All ships, execute Genesis protocol in 3, 2, 1. Space twisted. For a moment that seemed to last forever, reality bent and warped around the hive as multiple singularities formed simultaneously. The Krextar bioships were drawn inexorably toward the event horizons, their organic screams echoing across communication frequencies as they were stretched and compressed beyond recognition. The central organism, the living planet that had birthed the swarm, began to collapse in on itself. As it died, it released a psychic shriek so intense that several bridge crew members collapsed, overwhelmed by the alien agony. Then, everything was gone. Where the massive hive had been, there was now only empty space and the slowly expanding gravity wells of newborn black holes. But, even as Zealith watched, something remarkable began to happen. The black holes started to merge and stabilize, their event horizons shrinking as they consumed each other. "Engineering teams, begin stellar ignition sequence," Admiral Chen ordered. More human ships approached the gravitational anomalies, deploying equipment that Zealith couldn't even begin to understand. Streams of compressed hydrogen began flowing toward the collapsed space, followed by exotic matter that seemed to glow with its own light. "What are they doing?" she whispered. "Creating a star," Chen replied. "The black holes will provide the gravitational foundation. and we're adding the raw materials for nuclear fusion. In approximately 6 hours, this region will contain a brand new yellow dwarf star. The process unfolded with the precision of a carefully orchestrated symphony. More fleets arrived, carrying material from human industrial systems, each one adding components to the growing stellar construction project. Metallic frameworks materialized around the collapsing gravity wells, containing and directing the fusion reactions. As the first nuclear fires began to burn in the cosmic forge, Admiral Chun activated the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. The Krextar threat has been eliminated. The galaxy is secure. He paused, looking out at the newly forming star. Our work here is just beginning. Over the following days, Zealith watched as human engineering teams transformed the empty space into something extraordinary. Orbital platforms appeared around the new star, equipped with massive sensor arrays and communication equipment. Shipyards began construction, built to maintain the human fleet's presence in this region permanently. But perhaps most remarkably, memorial stations were established at precisely calculated points throughout the system. Each one was dedicated to a different species the Krextar had consumed, containing archives of their art, culture, and history. The humans had rescued what they could from the bio ships during the battle, preserving the memory of civilizations that might otherwise have been lost forever. A month later, Zealith stood in the newly constructed council chambers aboard the human space station New Harmony. Representatives from the surviving galactic species had gathered to address the new reality they found themselves in. Admiral Chun, now bearing the title of Supreme Commander of Galactic Defense, addressed the assembly. "The old galaxy is gone," he said simply. "The age of peaceful coexistence ended when the Krextar appeared. We now live in a universe where threats can emerge from the darkness without warning, where entire civilizations can be consumed before anyone realizes they're under attack." He gestured toward the massive viewports that showed the human fleet spreading throughout local space. "Humanity accepts the responsibility of defending this galaxy against future threats. We will establish patrol stations, early warning networks, and rapid response fleets throughout galactic space. No world will fall to monsters while human ships patrol the void." Chancellor Voss of the Andromedans raised a trembling hand. "And what do you ask in return for this protection?" Chen's expression was unreadable. "Nothing. The protection is freely given. However, the galaxy will need to adapt to new realities. Military cooperation will be mandatory for all member species. Worlds that cannot contribute to their own defense will be required to accept human garrison forces. And any technology that could be used to threaten galactic security will be subject to human oversight." The implications were clear. The galaxy had traded one form of existence for another, the peace of the old council for the protection of a military hegemony. "What if we refuse?" asked High Commander Thane. Chen's smile was cold. "Commander, your entire fleet consists of 3 damaged cruisers. Your homeworld is a refugee camp on a human-built habitat. You're welcome to refuse human protection, but I should point out that we've detected at least 6 other potential threats moving towards civilized space." The Krextar were just the beginning. Zealith looked around the chamber at the faces of her fellow survivors. Fear, resignation, and a kind of grateful despair warred in their expressions. They had asked for help from Earth's Deathworlders, and help had come. But the price of that help was everything they had once been. Later, as she stood alone on an observation deck, watching human patrols move through the system, Zealith wondered if they had made the right choice. The galaxy was safe, but it was no longer free. Humanity had become its guardian, protector, and ultimate authority. But as she thought of the millions of beings who were alive because human ships had answered their desperate call, she decided that perhaps freedom was a luxury they could no longer afford. The universe was vast and dark and full of horrors beyond imagination. At least now, it was guarded by something even more terrifying than the monsters that lurked in the void. In the distance, the new star burned bright and steady, a monument to the dead and a beacon for the living. Around it, human ships moved like silent guardians, watching the darkness and preparing for whatever might emerge from it next. The galaxy had been saved. Whether it could survive its saviors remained to be seen.